There's a lot of problems at Disney at the moment. Their creatives lack experience, their streaming service can't turn a profit, budgets are out of control, and the stock is dropping fast. But in this video, I want to look specifically at the new-ish phenomenon of mega-budget films, where films that could seemingly be made for a few $1 million are getting budgets in the hundreds of millions. Why is this? What's the motive? Why does an animated Pixar movie need $200 million just to happen? Let's take a closer look. In general, and I have to at least say this, all things, are more expensive than they used to be. Groceries cost more than they did yesterday, you get it, I don't need to explain inflation. I only bring this up because it can be quantified how much more things should cost than they did perhaps 10 years ago. I can look at a grocery order I made today versus 5 years ago of the same products and see that the cost has gone up over 20%, while my wage certainly has not. Does this even begin to explain the question posed in the intro? Not even close. Disney spends an exorbitant amount of money producing their films and shows. It's interesting, if you look at the top 15 most expensive Marvel productions, you'll see that most of them were produced after 2018. The older Avengers movies had those huge budgets too, namely because of all the A-listers they had to pay, not even taking CGI into account. But even the less star-studded films of the more recent years crossed the $200 million threshold. Black Widow, The Eternals, Black Panther. These were obviously huge movies, but they weren't near the scale of an Avengers movie. Yet Wakanda Forever cost $20 million more than Civil War. The Avengers 1 cost roughly the same as Black Widow. And what about their animated films? Their upcoming animated movie Wish has a budget of $200 million. Strange World had a budget of $180 million and only made $70 million. And this is the story of so many of their recent movies. Their streaming shows, typically $150 million for a Disney Plus Marvel show. And Disney Plus hasn't turned a profit since it came online. Huge budgets and little to no return on investment. Now, the reasons for Marvel movies, or even just Disney movies in general, not making the kind of money they used to goes deep. Streaming, ticket prices, quality, you name it. But that's not what this video is about. If you watch the trailer for the upcoming Wish movie, you can see that the animation is far worse than many of Disney's more prominent animated films, Moana, Frozen, etc. Marvel CGI has decreased in quality too, with many of the more recent films, such as Ant-Man Quantumania, looking like a hot mess. Now, if you look at the creatives involved in the making of a lot of the Marvel shows on Disney Plus, or even many of the recent films, you'll find that many of these creatives lack credits. They lack experience, have maybe only worked on one or two other projects, many of which not even adjacent to the genre that Marvel's pulling them into. They are under-tested and underdeveloped in their trade, and that's what it is, a trade. Writing is a skill, directing is a skill that takes time and experience to develop. But Disney doesn't want skilled tradesmen working on their productions. They want somebody they can control. We know this based on what we saw with Edgar Wright leaving the original Ant-Man production, or Scott Derrickson leaving Doctor Strange 2. Quote, creative differences with the studio. That's what they like to say, right? That they had creative differences. But the studio executives aren't creatives. They're businessmen and women. It's not their job to be creative or even be super involved in the making of these shows and films. James Gunn said it best when he was appointed CEO of the new DC Studios, that he's a writer at heart and wants to give creatives the freedom to do their jobs. And working within the constraints of a budget, or any form of constraints implemented by a production company, is part of the skill of being a director. Experienced directors and producers know how to work within constraints. These constraints would include the amount of touch-ups they need to do in post-production, aka CGI, and CGI is not free. There was a time when CGI couldn't be used as a crutch. Directors had to come up with creative ways to actually put what they wanted shown in front of the camera. When talking about this particular topic, I like to bring up Peter Jackson in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Jackson was given less than $300 million to work on those 3 films. Adjusted for inflation, that's $453 million today. Basing it off of the extended edition, we're talking about over 10 hours of film, quite possibly the greatest film trilogy of all time, at under $300 million. Jackson and his crew had to innovate to make those movies happen. He had to direct, they had to build things. Make Arwen look like she's riding a horse up close even though she's really just in a wooden box rocking back and forth. hire thousands of extras for an army, build a small-scale model of Minas Tirith, and have a little camera moving through the streets. Very little CGI assistance, something you barely see anymore. Why did Minas Tirith look so real as the camera flew above the city when Gandalf rode into Gondor? Because it was. They actually built it. As creatives work their way up in the industry, they learn these sorts of things. The tricks of the trade, the ways that they can cut costs and make something look good without spending millions of dollars on contracts with CGI companies. They meet people who know how to build small-scale models and work in special effects. Fight choreographers, so that instead of having to make an actor look like they're fighting, they can show them how to actually do it. And it's because of this that I believe that mega film budgets now are a major lesson in hubris for studios. They hire a no-name, someone they can control, to direct or write or just work on a project. Someone who's so grateful for the opportunity that they'll do whatever the studio wants. They give them all the money in the world, thinking that they just need the tools to make it happen without realizing that these creatives lack the skill, talent, and experience to create something great. No amount of money can change that. These underexperienced creatives rely on CGI to make their vision become reality because they never learned how to do it themselves without using CG as a crutch. And as more and more of these under-tested creatives are brought into the space, the more Hollywood loses the skill it used to have. There are so few highly skilled creatives left in Hollywood to work on these big-budget films because Disney doesn't want to hire somebody with creative integrity. They want someone who will do what they want. And you'll never see Christopher Nolan directing a Marvel movie for this exact reason. He won't sacrifice his creative integrity and creative freedom. The irony is that Disney could likely cut their budgets in half, hire real creatives, and solve this problem. But then they would lose absolute control over the creative vision of the preachy crap they want to produce. So instead, they'll raise Disney Plus prices and continue to alienate fans. I really love making these and I'd like to keep making them, so please subscribe and like the video. If you love this sort of content, consider becoming a member. See you in the next one.